But we talked about the GAS, General Adaptation Syndrome. And does anybody remember what that involved and how that relates to health? So what were the 3 stages of the General Adaptation Syndrome? You guys better study this. So the first one was alarm. Yeah, it was alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. So first you realize that you're facing some type of a threat, and your body goes into that fight or flight mode. It starts using up more resources, and then in the resistance stage, you continue to burn a lot of resources, and then if you don't deal with your problem quickly enough and resolve the source of your stress, then you go into the exhaustion phase, and it's at that stage that people have weakened immune systems, because usually your immune system uses a lot of your bodily resources to try to fight off infections. We're doing this all the time. But then if you become exhausted from too much stress, you're less able to do that and more likely to contract a bacterial infection or a virus or something of that sort. So that's the basic thing I wanted you to know about stress, immune system, and health. That exhaustion phase is when you're most susceptible to infection.
Alarm resistance and exhaustion.
Yeah, alarm resistance and exhaustion. Those are the 3 stages in order. What else?
The goals of cultural personalities.
Okay.
Psychology.
Yeah, the goals of cultural personality psychology. I guess this was from the cumulative
17.
section, right? Yeah, 17. So that's the first one under chapter 17. So what were those? This is just something we went over briefly at the beginning of that chapter. Take it out here. Yeah, so we want to discover the principles underlying cultural diversity. So, in other words, why you have differences, for example, between Western cultures and Eastern cultures in self-concept. So we know that there are differences out there, but you want to know why they exist. The principles underlying cultural diversity. How human psychology shapes culture, and vice versa. How culture shapes psychology. So we're not passive recipients of culture. We a lot of times will decide which ideas we want to embrace and which ideas we decide to reject. And so it's, very broadly speaking, those are the goals of cultural personality psychology.
And what do you want for the cultural differences in self-concept? Cultural
differences in self-concept? Okay. Oops. So, yeah, that's the last thing on chapter 17 there. Alright, so that's going to relate back to individualism versus collectivism. So what were those two? Anybody help me out?
Collectivism was you want to make the company look good, so everyone works together as a whole, and if you're a good team player, that's good.
Okay, and what was individualism? I see you raise your hand back there. Yeah. So people with an individualist perspective are independent. They tend to think more about themselves. So you see that a little bit more in Western cultures, like our own culture, and in Europe. Whereas Eastern cultures are more collectivistic, interdependent rather than independent. They tend to work toward the benefit of the group rather before they work toward their own goals. And so that's, the other thing from that was we had mentioned differences in how people view them, other differences in self-concept, like the types of statements that were endorsed by Japanese versus American students. Do y'all remember that study? So what was the finding?
We tend to say nicer things about ourselves than maybe the Japanese person might.
Yeah, there are differences in self-enhancement. American students are more likely to describe themselves as being special and above average and things like that, whereas the Japanese students were more likely to be humble and modest, and that's the big difference in self-enhancement. And we discussed that there's a question as to whether that's a difference in how these people actually view themselves, or whether it's a difference in self-presentation. So it could be that over there are just these social norms, that it's not good to present yourself in a really positive light because you might make other people jealous, and that would upset the group harmony. And remember, they're working toward group harmony with that collectivistic approach. Whereas over here, we're more independent, and so everybody's just trying to be the best, and we're not as concerned about those types of things. And I think that's about it for the cultural differences in self-concept.
On chapter 19, know the 3 categories of personality.
Okay, so the 3 categories of personality disorders. This one's pretty straightforward. What were those?
Is obsessive compulsive disorder one?
No, that's a specific disorder, but if you recall, all of those 10 disorders are grouped into 3 categories.
Erratic, anxious, and
Eccentric, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the erratic cluster, the anxious cluster, and the eccentric cluster. Yeah. Sorry, did you have your hand raised? Oh, you're just stretching?
Yeah.
No problem. Alright. How are we doing? Any other questions, things that are popping up on here? Let me put up the other study guide. Okay. I don't think there are as many questions from chapter 20, incidentally. You can probably pick this out from looking over the study guide. Just kind of be familiar with some of the stuff we talked about during that last lecture, potential future directions. But I think I only have 1 or 2 questions on the whole test from that one.
erratic, anxious, and eccentric.
So, any other questions?